Good morning, everyone. I'm Wendell Jones, and welcome to this special edition of our program, Issues of the Day. And we are on the road. We are coming live from Bimini today. And our program today is brought to you by Kentucky Fried Chicken, Caribbean Bottling, Epic Battery, Pinder Tiles, Family Guardian Insurance, Check Card, Simonet's Auto and Electrical, Burger King, and Save the Bays. And we are here in Bimini to find out what is happening in terms of the development of touristic resorts in Bimini, how people are feeling about what is happening in Bimini. The flight over today was a pleasant one. Indeed, all of the arrangements were made for us, and our fellows are ready to go for radio and television here. And so we are very pleased that we are in good surroundings here in Bimini. We are, as I said, going to talk about what is happening environmentally in Bimini, and we have environmentalists on our program today who are going to update us on what is happening. If you listen to Issues of the Day on a regular basis, you would have heard some weeks ago Mr. Fred Smith, who is an attorney in Grand Bahama and president of the Grand Bahama Human Rights Association. He was accompanied by Joe Dowdle, the Vice President of the Grand Bahama Human Rights Association. And we promised that we would come to Bimini, and so here we are. And today on our program, Joe Dowdle is here. He is also a director of Waterkeeper. We'll find out what that organization is all about. And I'm also joined in this first portion of Issues of the Day today by Rumi, who is a director of Save the Bays. Gentlemen, welcome to our program.
A pleasure.
Thank you, Wendell, and absolutely it's a pleasure and joy to be here. And thank you for accommodating us to that extent, for bringing all of your wonderful professionals and yourself to this beautiful little island, gem in the ocean, for this broadcast.
Thank you so very much. It took us a whole lot to get here in Bimini today. We don't normally get to a family island to do these Issues of the Day programs, but anything for you, Joe?
Oh, amen to that.
Okay. But tell us, before we begin in earnest, what is Waterkeeper?
Waterkeeper is an international alliance, and it was instituted so that there would be someone in particular cities' environments who would be the watchdog to make sure that all the water systems, whether on land or in the sea, were kept clean and pristine, or to be returned to that particular state. And so we had the Waterkeeper established at Clifton Bay a number of months ago, and then with respect to what was happening elsewhere in the Bahamas, they thought it expedient to appoint someone to be able to look at places like Bimini. And so I don't know why, but I guess they had confidence in Joe Dowdle, and they asked me if I would serve in that capacity, and I accepted because I love my waters. I love this beautiful archipelago of islands, and I don't want to see any destruction of that. No matter what the development may be, we have to harmonize, become a symbol of what it is to preserve a beautiful environment like the Bahamas.
Good. Rumi, you are an environmentalist. You've been in this area for many a long year. Indeed, I remember you as a fisheries officer, eh? Now you are an attorney. What is happening in Bimini that we should be concerned about?
Okay, I'm glad you asked that question. I'm very happy to be here with you. The first thing is the mixed signals in relation to the production of the environmental impact assessment. Depending on who you ask, you're getting a different response. And obviously that is very concerning, because you had the Member of Parliament and current Minister of Tourism, Mr. Wilshcombe, say that there was no EIA, on the heels of the Minister of Environment and Housing, Mr. Dorset, saying that there was one, against this superimposed idea that they must somehow keep that document to themselves and not let the Bahamian people know what's contained in these documents. And these documents were never intended to be a secret. As a matter of fact, a part of the environmental impact assessment process, one of the rules, Rules 7 and 8, mandate that those documents be shared with stakeholders. So we're asking ourselves, what is the rush? We're seeing development going on. We read in the newspapers there were no permits. What is the rush? What are we rushing for? What kind of precedent are we setting? We ask for these documents over and over again. Why is this being fast-tracked? Why aren't the normal protocols being followed? We are very concerned, and we want sustainable development for our country. This is what we want. The operative word is sustainable for the long term. We are in Bimini now, and you can see for yourself the unique beauty of this place. You could see even though we're here and we're in wonderful surroundings, there's still fragility associated with all of this.
You know, sustainable development, Rumi and Joe Davil, that means different things to different people. And so, Joe, let's begin with you. In terms of Bimini, what are you seeking to sustain? What is sustainable development for you, for Bimini?
Well, Bimini has been known for the fishing industry, deep diving. Internationally, it's one of probably the most fascinating dive sites here in the world. But over and above that, we have right off here to our right, Bimini Bay. And that area is the home of some over 100 species, marine species, which come there to mate, to spawn, and for the young animals to grow to a certain stage before they migrate out into the ocean, so that they do not become the prey of larger predators in the ocean. And so the bay itself is something I think that God Almighty has designed with these islands in order to supply the larger ocean. And not only the Bahamian seas, but also the Caribbean and the southern part of the United States, Florida, for example, and the Gulf. They profit from what takes place in the Bimini Bay. And that is something that is absolutely reprehensible, that a large portion of that bay has been compromised, has been what I call rape and pillage in order for some development to take place. And this is something we want to stop. We don't want this to go on any longer. Our problem is that we have people coming in here, developers, etc., who do not know the value of mangroves. They do not know the value of areas like Bimini Bay, which is absolutely essential for us to persist, for sustenance to be there for years to come. You come into the development, that development could be gone tomorrow. So what is left? We are left with the land and the sea. And therefore we need to preserve that for future generations so that they do not end up starving or having to migrate to another island, another country, in order to find a way of sustenance or living.
You know, sometimes we speak in incendiary terms, you know, Mr. Pereira and Mr. Davil. You talk about being the Bimini Bay being raped and pillaged. What do you mean by this? And both of you can speak to that.
Well, I'll speak to it. If you come into a particular area where there is life persisting,
yes, but
whether it's animal life or sea life, and you killed it, you have no regard for its perpetuation, then to me that is raping the environment. It is commensurate with probably taking advantage of a human person, because that particular bay, that particular entity, that refuge is absolutely necessary for the sustaining of life going on. But development, even tourism, is a parasitic economy. It depends on whether or not it's going to be convenient for people to come here. If something happens to these islands and we're cut off from the United States or elsewhere, we would have to fall back on the bays, we would have to fall back on the ocean. And if they're being destroyed by development, and development all of a sudden goes, and that has happened many times in the Bahamas.
Yeah, but what have you seen in Bimini Bay that displeases you?
Oh, man. Bimini Bay?
Yeah.
Well, the fact that you can go in there and root up mangroves and destroy species, the refuge, the habitat for so many species, that is reprehensible.
Yeah, but in order to have real development, you are going to have, at some point in time, to make some changes, to root up some things.
Absolutely.
And you can't build a house unless you move sometimes some trees. You can't build a dock unless you put some piling down.
When up, Mr. Jones, I couldn't agree with you more. You cannot build a house unless you remove some trees, and you cannot build a dock unless you put some pilings down. The problem with that is that in order to remove those trees and put those pilings down, you require a permit. That's right. The very ones that when we looked in the newspaper and read the newspaper report, they say that they don't have Again, why are we rushing to go ahead with development without the proper permits being in place?
Who's this
And
they?
we. Why are we as a people? Let me finish, because you asked me what things. I got one more for you.
Okay.
If you're going to put down pilings, right, and take over on the seabed, which is owned by the government of the Bahamas, then you need an environmental impact assessment. So how in the world you could say on the one hand that we are working with our master planners, EDSA, and they're going to develop a master plan. I read that in the newspaper as coming from this group that wants to do this development. How can you say that on the one hand, and then on the other hand, you say you've submitted your environmental impact assessment? Well, I'm here to tell you that EIA 101, elementary, basic, says that any EIA you submit will have a master plan in it. It's very confusing when you try to rationalize the statements that are being made by the developer, by the member of parliament for Bimini, by the government with due process. Why are we rushing ahead with a development without the permits being in place, without the EIA being disclosed to the people? Why is this shroud of secrecy? Why do we have this fortress mentality whereby we cannot get the information?
Well, let me correct my learned colleague here for a second. When he said that the seabed belongs to the government, it doesn't really belong to the government. The government is the steward, the keeper of the seabed. The seabed belongs to us. That seabed out there on the western side of Bimini, that is Crown land.
But the government represents you.
Yeah, but he represents me with a responsible way to go about things. And you do not proceed, and then afterwards you say, well, after they would have begun, then you come back and then you could wage a contest against it? No, that's putting the cart before the horse.
Rumi.
You think they'd be allowed to do that in South Florida? Start building without permits, Mr. Jones? I mean, you're a man that's traveled the world.
Florida?
You are a learned man.
Listen, we couldn't do that in the Bahamas. We would be in prison.
You think you can do that?
If we had done something like that.
Certainly there must have been some authorization for what has taken place in Bimini.
And we intend to find
there
it.
must have been some authorization for what is happening in Bimini Bay.
But what is happening in
Are you saying that you don't know?
Well, no. We know that permission was given.
Yes.
Unfortunately, to wreak havoc in the bay before, inside that bay right out there. But now what is happening in this additional thing to build this 1,000-foot dock and to create an island at the end of that dock, some 6 acres wide, that would create total havoc within the bay again, because the fill would have to come from somewhere, and there's somewhere it states that over 222,000 cubic feet of fill will be needed to carry out that particular process. So where it's going to come from? It's coming from our land or from our seabed. And I reiterate this to the people, that the government is the keeper, the stewards of our land and our seabed. It belongs, all of it, the land and the sea and the shores and the sand, they belong to the people of the Bahamas. And the government is not allowed by law. It can only be sold or disposed of or used if it redounds to the direct benefit of the people.
Mm-hmm. But certainly there must have been some protest by Save the Bays, or by Waterkeeper, or by somebody, or by the residents of Bimini for what has happened and what is happening.
We know that the last time that there was development in North Bimini, here's some things that we know. The Bahamas Journal of Science devoted an entire episode of their journal, an entire copy of their journal, to the negative impacts that were happening then. Back then, you had areas being reclaimed, you had fill being put in and creating anoxic zones. You had all sorts of issues going on. Today, those issues are being revisited. And we're asking, we have to ask ourselves, why are we allowing this to happen for a second time? And then, you know, I want to expand a little bit about what Mr. Darville says, because I believe that the people in New Providence forget this, and we must not forget this. My family is from Masons Bay, Acklands, and Arthurstown, Cat Island. Okay. That's right, Arthurstown, Cat Island, and Masons Bay, Acklands. I have cousins that depend on the environment to eat. They depend on being able to go to the bush, go in their little skiff, go out, get something to eat, to catch a meal. Same thing in Bimini. living in Bimini is like living on the side of a cell phone in the ocean. I mean, this is a very precarious state that we find ourselves in. Many people depend on that creek to the north of where we're sitting to eat for their livelihoods, especially if the winds are coming from that direction and they have to use that because it's a sheltered area. What we're saying is that we want to understand, seeing that you declared a portion of this a marine protected area, you did that on my behalf, and on behalf of all my children and grandchildren, we didn't reach yet. You did that for me ostensibly. Then we want to know, how is this development going to impact the area that you set aside for me? What is the point of setting aside an area for me if you're only going to denigrate it thereafter? I mean, what is the point of that? Which brings us back to the question, why are we rushing ahead with a development when all the information has not been disclosed? Why are we rushing ahead in the absence of permits? What arrangement is there for them to move forward with a development having kept the EIA to themselves? Do we have to end up in court just to find out information whereby in the ordinary course of things they should be disclosed? And I ask this question again, if we were in Florida, would they have kept this information to themselves?
So your problem is that...
Treat us with respect.
The EIA,
we are people too.
The EIA has not been disclosed.
One of many problems.
Has it been prepared?
Well, it depends on who you ask. Because if you ask the Member of Parliament for Bimini, the Honorable Mr. Wilshcombe, the answer to that is no. If you ask Mr. Dorset, the Minister of the Environment, then the answer to that is yes. So there's only one way to dispel all the myths, you know. Put it on the Best Commission website, or come with your hand and bring it to us right now, and we'll carry it with us.
In fact, Mr.
There's one easy way to dispel it. Bring it to the table.
Not only, even the BNT has yet to seek the EIA for that development in Bimini. They have no idea. They have asked for it. They have been here. They have looked over the environment, and they are totally opposed to what is taking place in North Bimini. And so that particular body, which is responsible for overseeing all of the parks in the Bahamas, doesn't even have access to that particular document. Furthermore, they were supposed to declare that area, the north part of Bimini, Bimini Bay, as a protected zone. That has been going on, been lagging for years and years now. How many years, Gail? Since 2000. And they have yet to make the final decision with respect to preserving that particular park. And I think it's due to the fact that initial permission was given to construct a golf course up in that area. Now, hopefully you'll get a chance to fly over or ride through that North Bimini land situation, in which is basically mangroves, etc., canals, and beautiful area where fish come to mate and to spawn, etc., 100 different species. And the outlet goes all the way on the north, which feeds Bimini Bay. And if you were to put a golf course in that area, you're going to destroy the whole bay, because it will not be fed again with water coming from the ocean to refresh, and the fish that come in through that canal system in North Bimini.
But Jodam, certainly, if you know this, Rumi, you know this, certainly we would expect the professionals who work in the various departments of our government to know it. You would expect the National Trust to be protesting. Where's the protest?
They've requested a copy of the environmental impact assessment. Let me give your listeners a little bit of imagery, right? And in addition to the nursery function of North Bimini, which is very, very important, I've traveled the site, and as an ecologist, that's perhaps one of the best mangrove creeks that I've seen in my 23 years of practicing ecology. That being said, there's also another very important function. The settlement of Alistown and Baileytown is south of that. That they are actually protected by that reserve during storm surges, during hurricanes. And it's not like we don't live in a zone where we don't have hurricanes. Bimini's been hit by a hurricane before. That's part and parcel of why the water doesn't wash over the whole thing. So what we're saying is that, okay, this is not only an important nursery area, but it has a very, very practical coastal protection function. If you want to develop something in what we have been led to believe and what has been declared a marine protected area, right down to the coordinates, right? Then why, on the one hand, are you holding back on making the official announcement of the marine protected area? Then on the other hand, you're saying there's no EIA. Then on the other hand, you're saying there's an EIA. Then the other hand, we read in the newspaper that people are working without permits. Then we see exploratory pilings going down, then we see all of this activity happening without public disclosure. We need to ask ourselves, how much do we value ourselves as a people? How can we allow people to come here, do things that they would not do in their own countries? And we're not asking for something that's onerous. We're not asking for something that's not within the natural order of things. We're asking for something that's standard practice worldwide. So I got to ask you, Mr. Jones, you are a man that has traveled the world. People respect you. They look up to you. How would you feel if someone goes, well, do you think, based on your travels, that if we were in South Florida, we would have this issue where we have to go on Love 97 and ask and plead to get information, or do you think that would have already been disclosed?
Yes, it would have been disclosed.
You sure?
It would have been disclosed. But what are Biminites saying about this?
Well, they don't know the information?
Because, if you listen to Joe Davil from Grand Bahama and Rumi from
next door to Love 97.
Next door to Love 97 in New Providence. Some people will say, thou protested too much.
Yeah. I heard that from Shakespeare.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Well, I mean, there's nothing to gain, and when one protested too much, it means that you have something in the background to gain. And we have this archipelago to protect and to gain. And so we doth protest too much. And I will go on protesting because this is something. For example, let me give you another point. If you have no vested interest in the country and you come here to carry out a development and you bring in a whole expatriate force to carry out the work, they know nothing about what is necessary, what is absolutely essential within that particular environment to preserve. And that is exactly what has happened in North Bimini. They were allowed, by virtue of their heads of agreement apparently, to bring in their own workforce, and they know nothing about why the mangroves are there. And when they came in originally, they actually stated that the mangroves serve no purpose, so we can dig them up and we could use the fill for whatever purpose we have. And that's like going about their business like it's nobody else's business. And that is something we cannot allow. And I don't care who tells me otherwise. I belong to Bimini, I belong to Nassau, I belong to Long Island, I belong to Freeport. This is my Bahamas.
You're Bahamian.
I'm a Bahamian. And wherever I go in land or sea, I am at home. And I don't want to see any part of it indiscriminately destroyed by unregulated development. And again, I say, it baffles me because we've been to Bimini now many times, and you walk down the street, you talk to the Biminites, not one of them have employment up into that particular area. Now, with respect to the airport, there are a symbolic number of Bahamians being employed. And I think that came after we had made so much fuss about the fact that Bahamians first, jobs first for Bahamians, and yet all the expatriates up there are doing the work in building the casino, etc., etc. That to me is absolutely reprehensible. It is not national, and I call it like terrorism against our own nation and its people.
Rumi?
Well, I mean, I like that quote that you introduced, thou dost protest too much. I'm going to give you one of my own, and this is from Julius Caesar. The things that fear me are at my back, and when they shall see the face of Caesar, they are vanished. And by that, I am asking the question, okay? Why are we rushing ahead with a development when proper protocols have not been established? Why are we continuously rushing ahead